It is the common error of this age to attribute misfortune to fate, to mislabel avoidable consequence as act of God, and to imagine that the cracks in a collapsing wall are simply the artistry of rustic design. In no place is this self-deception more grotesquely on display than in the slow-motion erosion of the American Thanksgiving, not by tempest, pestilence, nor act of divine whim, but by that most unimpeachable of calamities, human negligence, administered steadily by the modern state, and disguised beneath the polished lies of official assurance. Let it be known then, to any who still imagine this season's disorder to be incidental, the result of bad weather or too many eager families with too many plans, that the truth is rather plainer and far more vulgar. The government, by a series of prolonged refusals to do its most basic duties, has functionally cancelled the holiday. Not by proclamation, not with trumpet or decree, but by the slow suffocation of every system upon which Thanksgiving depends. The chain of causality is neither obscure nor debatable. It begins with agriculture, the production of turkeys, that ancient and sacrificial bird of November. For years, producers have raised warnings of rising feed costs, volatile fuel markets, tightening labor, and outbreaks of disease. They pleaded, not for alchemy, but for stability, the kind of dull, dependable intervention which even the most reluctant bureaucrat ought to manage. But what they received instead was the performative sympathy of the press secretary, the seasonal appearance of concern, and a resounding absence of structural support. The shelves are thin, not because disaster struck, but because disaster was invited and offered a seat at the table. From farms, we pass naturally to the means of transportation. That is, the weary and wheezing system of trains, trucks, and aircraft, which now, each November, is called upon to carry the burden of a hopeful nation. The burden, however, finds no stable shoulders. Staffing shortages abound, not from sudden exodus, but from years of attrition, as the federal government found it more expedient to postpone every recruitment, delay every replacement, and deny every alarm. Thus, a modest storm in a modest town now produces nationwide collapse, and the public, once mobile, becomes mired in a network whose fragility has become its most dependable feature. If one were of a forgiving disposition, an indulgence I do not share, one might excuse such cracks as the ungovernable result of nature. But then one arrives at the government shutdown, and forgiveness finds itself unemployed. To paralyze the federal machinery at precisely the moment when it is most needed, to furlough those who keep the skies safe, the terminals moving, and the inspections honest, is no accident. It is a deliberate desecration of function, performed under the banner of politics, and met with such bland resignation that one could be forgiven for believing the government considers itself optional. The insult, however, is not merely the failure, it is the lie. For when the shelves thin, when the gates close, when the passengers sleep upright beside vending machines that accept no currency but despair, we are told, with the remarkable clarity of the professionally unbothered, that all is under control. No statement has ever contradicted the evidence of one's senses with such polished confidence. It is not reassurance, it is contempt in velvet slippers. A government that admits failure may be corrected, one that denies it is no longer governing, but managing disbelief. And so we come, at last, to the public. The ordinary American, who despite every indignity, still attempts to gather family, still hunts for turkey at a price that won't require pawned heirlooms, still believes, perhaps desperately, in the ritual of return. But even tradition, it seems, has a weight limit, and the weight of this moment, the bureaucratic rot, the logistical chaos, the threadbare competence of a state that now resembles more a customer service hotline than a functioning republic, is too great to bear. The failure is total not because any one part has collapsed beyond repair, but because every part has failed at once, and each failure reinforces the next. Transportation cannot function because staff are absent. Staff are absent because budgets are frozen. Budgets are frozen because governance is gamified. Supply chains are weak because systems meant to protect them were hollowed out for the sake of quarterly optics. And the public is anxious, not from hysteria, but from long acquaintance with being misled. Thus, Thanksgiving withers, not as a symbol, but as a system. And still, the ministers of gloss persist, that it is a blip, a hiccup, a momentary inconvenience to be endured with good cheer and cranberry. But their assurances echo now only in terminals and empty aisles. The feast was not undone by appetite, but by absence, of foresight, of courage, of plain maintenance. Let no one mistake this moment for misfortune. This is not misfortune. This is neglect, made manifest in flight delays and paltry inflation. And unless the state relearns how to govern, not to speechify, not to spin, but to govern, this will not be the last holiday we lose. It will only be the first whose corpse is still warm enough to notice.